Okay, so for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Danielle. I'm a customer success manager here, Discourse. I'm here with some lovely members from the Discourse design team. So how this will flow is we have a presentation prepared for you all. In the registration, you did have the opportunity to present some questions. So we picked some of those and tried to align similar questions. So we'll answer those at the end. And then as we have time, we plan for about 30 minutes for this presentation. But as we have time, if you all have live questions, feel free to drop those in. I'll be taking a look at those as we move along. All right. Um, Hello, Jen. Hello, Vincent. Hello, Tobias. Hello, everyone that's posting hello in the chat. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so it's time to meet some designers. We have Jordan and Chris here, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Jordan Vidrine from Louisiana, work from Louisiana. I am the design team lead for Discourse and have been here almost 5 years now. Joined in 2020 and yeah, enjoy working here. And I'm not sure what else to say, but I'll let Chris introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Chris. I live in Boston. I've been working for Discourse full time for 7 years now. And before that, I was contracting on a part-time basis before they had any designers on the team. So I've been kind of working on Discourse since pretty close to the beginning, I think. Um, it's been a while.
Okay, so we're next going to talk about how the design team here at Discourse is structured because we have kind of a unique design in that we have kind of a split between the teams. So I'll let Jordan go ahead and talk about our structure.
Yes, so at Discourse, this is fairly recent in Discourse's lifespan, but over the past probably like 3 years or so, as we've grown and as we've hired more people, we've had to split our design team. It's not a super big split because we all still meet together as a design team, but we have two customer projects focused designers, and they're primarily designing for clients that are onboarding with Discourse. These Bryce and Ty are doing many of the customizations and working with clients on getting their sites looking branded, looking like they want it to look. And then on the other side of things, we have our core team, which is designers designing features and elements or redesigning things inside of the Discourse software itself. So things like chat, things like bookmarks, a lot of the new AI features, those are all things being focused on by the core internal designers. And those are Charlie, Ella, Chris, who's with us here, and Megna. So that's basically the split we have. But we still all work together and we're in communication with one another. And a lot of things that the customer projects designers encounter sometimes influence what we are doing on the internal core team as well.
Okay, excellent. So I know what a lot of you are here for is a community showcase to take a look at some Discourse communities, those that kind of use Discourse out of the box, if you will, versus some really deep customizations that our designers that Jordan just spoke about are able to do. Chris is very involved with this as well. So I am going to just lay back and let them share their screen and walk you through some of our communities.
I'll go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. I'm basically, okay, it's going to stop your screen, Danielle, for a bit. Okay. And I'm going to show this screen. Is this visible for everyone? I should be on the Discover community. This website, this discover.discourse.org, is our newish site that features a lot of Discourse instances in the wild. We've got all types. We have tech, interest, sport, media, gaming, etc. And I'm just going to quickly go through 2 or 3 forums that use Discourse and show how either simple or how deep customizations can be. Just real quickly, I'll show you one. This is OpenAI Developer Forum. This is mostly unstyled. This is very similar to what Discourse would look like if you applied no styling to it. I believe this site has some font customizations going on and a color scheme, but that's about it. So this is an example of something super simple right out of the box that just with a good logo updated and some color scheme changes, you can get your site looking sort of similar to your own brand. Something else going on here is a header link component that you can customize and have links appearing in your header that either can go in the form or external to the form, which is what these are doing. The next site I would like to look at is a Make community. And just to confirm, when I click this, you can all see this, right? Okay. I was like in the back of my head, what if I'm just talking about nothing here? This community is a bit more in-depth in its features customization. We have they've increased the spacing and the font size of the sidebar here. They've also made it full width. Let me just X this out. We have a very large and prominent search banner being going on here. This is a component that we have available on Meta, which is a link to the repo that anyone can install on their forum. Works just like if you would click on the search bar here, but it just surfaces that search feature a little bit sooner. In this area, they've customized some categories to just pretty much largely change the look of how Discourse will render these. And then here we have a customization showing some popular topics. That's about as deep as they go. And then here is another component added to the page to showcase some community highlights. These just go to different topics that they've customized the links to in the settings of the component. So I'd say this is a bit more in-depth. And then the next one I will show you is extremely in-depth. This one is the Epic community, the Epic developer community. This is Unreal Engine. They have their forum using Discourse. There's a lot going on here. I'm not going to go super in-depth, but as you can see, this is a severe departure from how Discourse traditionally looks. They have a customized sidebar here, it looks like. They've definitely changed the look and feel of the category homepage. If you set your homepage to this certain category layout, it would look like this. I'll go into one of these topics just to see. And this is how their topic list looks. They've customized certain icons. They have a plugin. It looks like they're using the questions and answers plugin. I believe that's the name of it. If not, please forgive me for not knowing the name of our own plugins. And this is how it looks once you're in a topic. They have a custom breadcrumb menu happening here. They have their title looking a bit different and some of the metadata appearing in that title. And they have their posts looking pretty different than how Discourse normally has it. I just want to quickly show you all that just to show all the different types of customizations you can add to your site, from the most basic being, something like OpenAI to super in-depth, like the Epic developer community forums. And yeah, those are just quickly the ones I wanted to show. So back to you, Danielle.
Okay, awesome. All right, so just to kind of recap here, let me reshare. Okay, so that was a community showcase, but you all have the ability to go in and look at more designs on our Discover page, as well as explore themes, theme components, and things like that. So we do have some categories on Discourse Meta. For those of you who are super new, Meta is our community that we use for Discourse. It's a great resource to take a look at what other people are doing, ask questions, things like that. You can explore the themes that we have available out of the box, as well as theme components. We'll get into what those are in just a bit. That's one of the first questions coming up in the Q&A section. And then Discourse Discover is what Jordan was going through. So it's just discover.discourse.org. We'll also include a link to that in the recap post, which will be on Meta shortly. All right, so let's get into some questions here. So the first question is, can you define a theme versus a theme component? And I'll kick that off to Jordan.
Yeah, it's simple, but it can also be a little deeper. But a theme traditionally will be where you would want to edit the look and feel of the site with, custom CSS and things like that, color schemes, rounded corners on your buttons, the spacings, font size, things like that. Technically, you can also put in your own components and your own pieces that you would build yourself with JavaScript and inject those into different areas in Discourse we call plugin outlets. But primarily, we like that to happen in theme components, which you can install onto a theme. So a theme is going to be like the house for these customizations, and the theme components will be the individual customized elements. For instance, a header links component, a search banner component, a right sidebar blocks component would all be installed onto the site's main theme. And those are the differences in the two.
Okay, so next question is, what are some initial steps I can take when approaching community design? I'll send that over to Chris just to talk about, if you're brand new to Discourse or brand new to building a community with our platform, how should you approach that?
So yeah, I would always start off simple and make sure you kind of understand the functionality of Discourse before you go too far into customizing it. But in general, definitely I would try to identify some goals for your community to start with, and kind of take it from there. So, for example, if you want your community really deeply integrated with like a primary website that you have, you would obviously want to link to it somewhere. So one of the customizations you would want to include might be header links or something like that, linking back to your main site. And then if you have, an overall brand, you'll definitely want to make sure you're incorporating your brand colors and various, matching fonts and various things like that. So it looks more like a cohesive experience with other sites or properties that you may have. And I guess one of the other big things too is to realize that, if you're developing customizations for your community, um, you will have to maintain those over time. So, one way that we kind of help with that is by offering a lot of free theme components on our meta site. So if you're adding something fairly common like a banner or header links or a footer or something like that, rather than building something fully custom, we have a lot of components that you can use, and we maintain those ourselves. So that takes some of that maintenance burden away from, building a new community on Discourse. Um, and yeah, and there are a lot of just general steps to, like, making sure you understand who your audience is, so you're designing for the right people. Um, Listening to some of your early community members when you do start your community, and just listening to what they think about things, what they need, what they don't need. Sometimes it's helpful just to hide certain elements that your community might not need through either site settings or some kind of simple CSS, which we have a lot of posts to search for concerning that on Meta as well. So yeah, it's just kind of using, I would say definitely use Discourse and understand who's using it and what they need and what your goals are, and take it from there.
Awesome. That is great direction there. We are going to move to our next question, which is, what are the most common changes we can make to customize our community? So I know as a CSM, a lot of people ask about kind of the navigation, the header, the sidebar, things like that. I will kick that one over to Jordan to lead this off.
Yeah, some of well, the more common customizations we see people wanting are like the search header, well, the search banner, which I showed on the Make community earlier, is a good example of that. Header links, which a lot of sites will use the header links to mimic their own website uh, header, which Chris mentioned. Like if you want your site to feel as though they're just on another area of your own website, a lot of people will get that header links component looking just like the main website. So if you're on your main website and you click forum, you're linking to the new forum you have, it'll just feel as though it's a part of the website. And then other than that, there's just a lot of different things that it depends on. That we have a featured topics component I find is pretty often used. And I'm going to also plug what you mentioned earlier, Danielle. If you go to meta.discourse.org and you go to the theme category, and then you filter that view to the top view, you're going to see a lot of the most popular components that you can use and change and get going on your site. And I wanted to also, I'm not sure if this will be in another question, Danielle, but we also have, for those who might not have a ton of experience with development or things like that, we have ask.discourse.com, and that is a question site right now that it's going to use the data from meta.discourse.org, but you can ask questions to it and it will give you areas where you can do some more research if you're looking to make those customizations yourself.
Okay, awesome. Next question is going to be, what are the steps to get from out of the box fresh install to something highly customized? So to go back to what we spoke before, OpenAI, that's fairly out of the box. They've added their logo, things like that. But then you have something like Unreal Engine, which does not look like Discourse at all. Jordan or Chris, I'm sure you could both maybe speak to this, but what would I do if I wanted to take Discourse well beyond what it is out of the box?
Yeah. Chris, do you want to?
Sure.
I don't mind answering. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can. So if you want something highly customized, you'll usually want to work with some developers. So that could be, we offer access to our team for custom development, which is where a lot of these highly custom themes come from, like for Epic. And that's available for our enterprise customers. But there are also some third-party developers that are familiar with Discourse that are on our meta site, and just web developers in general. But some of these highly customized themes have taken hundreds of hours of development time. And it always involves coming up with some initial needs and plans and ideas, and then the way we do it is we'll estimate that and we'll work with our customers to try to fit within their their technical requirements and also the constraints of working within Discourse. So that often requires some back and forth and ongoing discussion. It's not like it's highly customized is takes a lot of work. But we do, as I mentioned earlier, have a lot of theme components available on our meta site completely for free, and those a combination of various theme components can end up in a fairly customized result now. And we're always creating more as we see the need for them. Yeah.
Awesome. So next question, which I believe is the final of our kind of curated questions from the registration form, and then we'll get to, I see there are a couple of live questions. We'll get to those momentarily. So this one is for Chris as well, but one of the big questions I see as a CSM, and then of course, for those of you who were registering for this webinar, were how can I make my discourse look like blank? So how can I make it look like Circle or Reddit or something like that?
Yeah, and that's similar to the last question I answered, which is through themes. We do have some themes on Meta that, for example, we have a Reddit theme that will make your site look more like Reddit, so that's available. But and we have a theme called Central that looks more like Circle does. So yeah, really in Discourse, you could more or less make it look like any other site through themes, and that that concerns mostly the appearance. There are some functionality differences that are harder to work around. So if you try out one of those themes, you'll notice that it's kind of like Reddit, but not quite. It's not. We're not making one-to-one copies because that would involve a lot more underlying functionality changes that would be harder to maintain. But yeah. Themes are the answer to pretty much everything customizing Discourse.
Yeah, so you can access themes from the site we mentioned earlier. The site is Meta, but like for instance, this is the central theme. You can see how that looks, simple, modular, kind of closer to Circle and things like that. We will also be writing a recap post, so we'll link to a lot of the resources that we mentioned, but yeah, these are a great jumping off point. I'm going to go to the thank you slide, just so we're not looking at the same question over and over, but we would like to get into a few live questions. We have about 6 minutes-ish here. So I want to go ahead and start answering those. The first one is, in-house designers tend to ask about Figma resources for Discourse. Do you have these requests from clients? And if so, how do you approach them?
Yes, we have gotten this request from a handful of people. It's not a ton. Um, but we personally use some Figma components like on our design team when we're making designs and stuff, but we do not have a fully built component list in Figma for how deep discourse customization to get. I guess I'll answer this. This is my personal opinion. I'm not saying it's the opinion of Discourse or the design team. I personally feel like offering Discourse, I feel like if we created components that matched every element of Discourse in Figma, it might lead to an I don't know, the word just fell off the tip of my tongue, but it might lead to an expectation that will be hard to accomplish because there's so much you can do in Figma and you can change the component many which ways that once you translate back into the Discourse site, it might not be translatable, and that might lead to some conflict on, if the design is accomplishable or not. But it's a good question. Yeah, it's something we've definitely thought about, and that's about as much info I have on that answer.
Yeah, and I think I could probably add a little too. We do mock up features before we implement them, but we don't. We try to keep kind of mock-ups as minimal as possible. So we're not spending a lot of time making these pixel perfect designs of every single feature that we ever implement, which is what a lot of larger companies do. Because it's very time consuming. And if we were to maintain a library in Figma, that means every time we have to update Discourse, we would also have to update our Figma library. And we're a fairly small design team, so we tend to go pretty quickly from a very basic mockup to actually implementing it rather than creating pages and pages of these documents.
Yeah.
All right. So next question, we have 2 more in the queue. So if you have any last minute questions, let us know. But we'll start with this next one, which is, will topic lists be redesigned without tables?
Yeah, that's a good question. Chris, you might know the answer to that. I can't answer
Yeah.
if it will or will not happen, but it is something that we've tested out and are testing out. Because
It's something we've gone back and forth on, and it can be a little tricky, I think. And we haven't, we need to discuss this maybe a little more internally too, but I think we've gotten, to the point where things are now. If you don't want the topic list to be a table, you can change that with CSS. You can set, you can use the table structure, and you could set the table element to be a grid element and restructure the items within like that. One downside of moving away from tables that I've discovered, because we moved our user directory away from tables at one point, is that it makes it look like a table, but it doesn't work like a table. And that kind of can defy some expectations with accessibility, because tables can be navigated in a very specific way, with screen readers and various accessible technology. So if we take a bunch of divs and make it look like a table, it's a lot harder to make that accessible versus having a table and then using CSS to make that look like something else. So it's a little bit tricky, and I don't know if there's like perfect answer one way or the other, but that's kind of where we're at with it. So
and
maybe someday, but we're not currently planning on it.
yeah, another thing, just to give you a bit of like the types of things the design team encounters, is some of these like areas of discourse, like the topic list. We have to be very careful about making those sorts of changes, with or adding, removing classes, adding, removing like HTML markup, because we have so many sites that rely on what's already there. Sometimes even the slightest change will cause breakage that we may not have thought about. I mean, obviously we have a lot of testing we do before we push those changes out, but that's another big hindrance to wanting to tackle that area as well.
And we don't control, like we build a lot of themes for customers and we make themes available, but plenty of customers build their own themes that we don't have any insight into. So every time we change layout structures or class names or anything like that, we always run the risk of breaking, many customer themes. It could be dozens, even with a minor class name change. So it can be a little tricky to make bigger changes like that. But yeah, like Jordan said, we do try to test them as much as we can when we do.
Okay, so we have 2 questions in the queue. I'm going to try to get to both of them, not navigate back to the other slide. But so one is, I'm curious to know how plugins and components are made and tested. What's the difference between a plugin and a component? When does the development, what does the development process look like? Who decides on which components get created and which ones get tested by users? The multi-parter there.
Yeah. I think I can answer the component question because that's what I know more about, and Chris may be able to back me up on this. Is that what over the years, if we see a lot of customers or clients asking for a certain behavior that is achievable in a component, and we've built it multiple times for a client, that's a signal to us that maybe we should build this component and make it available on Meta. Maybe more people than just these clients want this. So that's one reason. Another way we make components is one of us wants to scratch a curiosity itch that we think a lot of other people will benefit from as well. We'll make those into components. Maybe Chris, you have some other reasons that we've done components in the past as a internal team.
Yeah, that's kind of it. It's we'll build it if there's a need for it, or if if someone um, if a customer is asking us to build a certain functionality into their theme, we might later take that and spin off a separate theme component that does the same thing because we've already done the work, so we might as well share it if we can.
Yeah. And as for plugins and why a decision gets made into a whole plugin, I feel like that's a bit more of a deep question that a developer team might be able to better answer. I can't explicitly give you any information there on that one, other than plugins are, once you start getting into that territory, you're getting into Rails and Ruby code, which you don't need to have knowledge of that by making components. So it's a little bit more front end for components, but plugins touch the back end a lot.
Yeah, and one thing we have to be mindful of on our own hosting is that since plugins can change so much for the backend, they can have performance implications. So we do limit, we don't allow third-party plugins on some of our lower hosting plans because we don't because they're so far reaching into the Discourse backend, they could um, you know they could edit databases and things like that. Whereas themes and theme components are fairly safe because those are all on the front end. Those are all running on your browser, and they have, they can't do as much damage to a database or performance most of the time.
Okay, and then our last question is, it's following up. It's a different person, but it's following up on Figma. Um, it says, how about the built-in style guide pages? How much of the native components are covered in that style guide?
Oh, that's a good question. We try to put everything in there. I know one of our developers, Joffrey, he is that's something he's passionate about, is having those components testable and usable in there so people can kind of play around with that and see, if you want to quickly change the design of something, go to the style guide and kind of like make your edits there and see how it's going to affect all of the areas that use those components that you're editing. But as far as a statistic of how many of the native, I'm not sure how many are not in there versus how many are in there. Chris, do you know that, or is it just sort of like,
No, it's not fully comprehensive, really. We don't have like we don't have any rules or requirements when it comes to adding new Discourse features that makes things end up there. So it's kind of if someone has the time to add something that they've developed to it, they will. So it's definitely not covering a lot of various things.
yeah, if I'll give you this, it's not in any sort of flow or workflow we have when we make something new, we don't have an internal rule that we're forced to add it into that area. So yeah, it's like what Chris said. It's kind of like if the person thinks of putting it in there, it's in there. And for the most part, a lot of the important pieces are in there, but there's obviously some missing things too. But one interesting thing is we're open source. So if you see something is not in there, you can make a PR to add something you want to appear there, and we'll review it. And if it looks good, we'll go ahead and merge it.
Awesome. So those are the questions that we have time for. Within about a week, we'll be posting this replay as well as a recap of all the questions, links, things like that to the Meta forum or Meta community. Thank you everyone for coming. Special thank you to Chris and Jordan for taking your time to share all of this information with us. And that's my sign off. Everyone have a great day.